She cheated on me last night. I know it with absolute certainty, the kind that settles deep in your bones, making it impossible to deny. But this isn't about just last night. This is about all the nights before it, the ones I ignored, the ones where I let her lies wrap around me like a slow, suffocating noose. For 8 years, I have been a devoted husband, faithful, loyal, blind. Julia always had a way of making me believe whatever she wanted. She would look me in the eye, say all the right things, and I would believe her. But last night, she made a mistake. A single, undeniable mistake. She thought I was asleep. She came home late, far too late for the business dinner she had supposedly attended. I heard the soft creak of the front door, the hushed sound of her heels slipping off. I might have let it go, might have convinced myself she was just working late. But then came the scent. Not her perfume. Not the faint traces of vanilla and jasmine I had memorized over the years. No, this was something else. Something distinctly masculine. A deep, woodsy cologne that clung to her skin like a second betrayal. I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep as she slipped into bed beside me. She was careful not to wake me, but I could feel the tension in her body. The way she exhaled too slowly, the way she lay still as if afraid to move. And then, her phone buzzed. She didn't check it, but I didn't need to see the message. I already knew who it was from. I should have confronted her right then. I should have turned to her, demanded the truth, forced her to look me in the eyes and confess. But I didn't, because I needed more than just suspicion. I needed proof. So I stayed still, waiting, calculating. I had spent years building a life with this woman, and she was tearing it apart one lie at a time. But if she thought I was just going to sit back and let it happen, she was wrong. Tomorrow, I would find out the truth. And when I did, Julia would finally understand the cost of her choices. She told me she was meeting her sister for dinner. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate gold chain around her neck, smoothing out the imaginary wrinkles on her sleek black dress. She looked perfect, effortlessly beautiful, just as she always did. But tonight, something was off. It was the perfume. She rarely changed scents, always favoring something light and floral. But tonight, she smelled different. Something richer, more seductive. For a dinner with her sister? I leaned against the bedroom doorframe, watching her with the same quiet scrutiny I had used for years in business meetings, in negotiations, in every moment where I needed to read between the lines. "You're going to Olivia's?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She turned, flashing me a smile, one I had fallen for countless times before. "Yeah," she said lightly, grabbing her purse. She had a rough week. I promised I'd take her out for some drinks. A flawless lie. Smooth. Well-rehearsed. But I knew the truth. I had called Olivia earlier that afternoon. She hadn't spoken to Julia in weeks. I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Sounds nice. Tell her I said hi." She hesitated for half a second, just enough for me to see the flicker of guilt. But then she leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek, and walked out the door. I waited exactly 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and following. She didn't drive toward Olivia's apartment. Instead, she took a turn onto the highway, heading toward the city. I kept my distance, staying 3 cars behind, my hands tightening around the steering wheel with every mile. She pulled into a parking lot beside a dimly lit bar on the far end of downtown. It wasn't a place she would ever take Olivia, not the kind of upscale lounge she usually preferred. My pulse thundered as I watched her step inside. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15, and then I saw him. Tall, well-dressed, confident, the kind of man who didn't hesitate. She met him at the bar, her expression shifting into something I hadn't seen in years. Excitement, anticipation, the way she used to look at me. And then she leaned in, and then she kissed him. My stomach dropped. A strange, hollow sensation spread through my chest, like I had been punched from the inside out. The life I thought I had, the love I believed in, had just been rewritten before my eyes. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember how I got home. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. I woke up to the sound of her humming in the kitchen. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't kissed another man just hours ago. Hadn't walked into our home carrying the scent of betrayal on her skin. I lay in bed for a few moments, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene at the bar over and over. The way she smiled at him, the way her fingers trailed along his arm, the way she leaned in, her lips brushing against his. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. I needed to be smart. Throwing accusations at her now would only give her the upper hand. She would deny it, twist the truth, turn herself into the victim. No, I wouldn't make this easy for her. I would play the role of the clueless husband a little while longer. When I walked into the kitchen, Julia looked up from her coffee with an easy smile. "Morning," she said, her tone light, affectionate. "You were out cold when I got home. Long day?" "Long day?" I almost laughed at the audacity. "Yeah," I said, forcing a yawn, pretending to rub the sleep from my eyes. "Did you have fun with Olivia?" A flicker of hesitation, barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Yeah, it was nice," she said smoothly, picking up her coffee. "We had some wine, caught up on things." She sends her love. Lie. She sipped her coffee, watching me over the rim of her mug, waiting to see if I would challenge her. I smiled, pretending to believe her. "Good. I'm glad." She relaxed. I watched her, studying her movements, the way she so effortlessly played the role of the devoted wife, the way she smiled at me like she hadn't spent last night in another man's arms. And I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't devastated. I was angry, not just at her, but at myself, for trusting her, for not seeing it sooner, for wasting 8 years of my life on a woman who could sit across from me, lie to my face, and not even flinch. But that was going to change. If she thought she could play this game and win, she was wrong. Because now, I was playing too. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. I moved through the next few days as if I were the same man I had been before I saw her kiss him, before I realized our entire marriage was a lie. I still kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I still asked how her day was. I still listened as she fabricated stories, pretending to believe every word. But beneath the surface, I was watching, calculating, planning. She had no idea. That Friday, I told her I had to work late. She didn't even pretend to be disappointed. Instead, she simply kissed my cheek, grabbed her purse, and said she was meeting Olivia again. I smiled as I watched her leave, forcing myself to look at her the way I used to, like she was the center of my world. Then, the moment the door closed, I grabbed my keys and followed. She went back to him. Of course she did. I kept my distance, watching from the shadows as she walked into a boutique hotel, one of those discreet, high-end places meant for people who didn't want to be seen. She greeted him in the lobby with a kiss that lasted too long, her hands gripping his jacket as he pulled her against him. They whispered something to each other before disappearing down the hall. I leaned back against my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was worse than I thought. She wasn't just sleeping with him. She was in love with him. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, my mind spinning with everything I had just witnessed. I had suspected an affair, but seeing the way she touched him, the way she looked at him, was different. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. I was done pretending. It was time for the next phase of my plan. Julia wanted to play this game. She had no idea who she was up against. The moment I got home, I opened my laptop. I had spent the last few days thinking about how I wanted this to end. Confronting her now would be satisfying, but temporary. She'd cry, deny it at first, then maybe admit to a mistake. Something meaningless, something impulsive. She would try to manipulate me. No, I needed to be smarter than that. This wouldn't be a confrontation. This would be an execution. I started digging. I knew Julia handled most of our finances, but I had access when I needed it. I logged into our joint bank account, scrolling through transactions, looking for anything suspicious. It didn't take long to find it. A second account, hidden under her maiden name, funded by monthly withdrawals from our savings. Not huge amounts, small enough to go unnoticed, but over time, they had added up. Tens of thousands of dollars. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of my desk. She wasn't just betraying me with her body. She was preparing to leave. I stayed up most of the night gathering evidence. Screenshots, bank statements, transfers. I even managed to get access to her personal email, something I had never thought to check before. The messages were worse than I imagined. She had been with him for over a year. She had told him she loved him. She had told him I was safe, a man she could depend on while she built a future with someone else. And the worst part? She was planning to take half of everything when she left. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to destroy her, piece by piece. She thought she had me trapped. She had no idea that by the time I was finished, she would be the one with nothing. I barely slept. By the time Julia woke up, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, watching her move through the morning like nothing had changed. She was glowing, radiant. She had no idea that I knew, and that made this even easier. "Morning," she said, stretching as she walked over to kiss my cheek. I let her. I let her play the role of the devoted wife, savoring the irony of it all. "Morning," I replied, forcing an easy smile. "Busy day today?" She hesitated for half a second, just long enough for me to see the flicker of guilt behind her eyes. "Yeah," she said, grabbing a mug from the cupboard. "I have a lunch with Olivia, then I need to stop by the boutique. I might be home late." Another lie. Another brick in the wall of her betrayal. "Sounds nice," I said, acting as if I believed her. "Actually, I was thinking, maybe we should go away for the weekend. Just the two of us." She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh." She hesitated. "This weekend?" "Yeah," I said smoothly, sipping my coffee. "I feel like we haven't spent enough time together lately. We could drive up to the cabin. Unplug. Reconnect." She bit her lip. For a second, I almost laughed. I could see the war inside her. She couldn't say no outright. That would be suspicious. But she also couldn't say yes, because that would mean canceling plans with him. "I'll check my schedule," she finally said, offering me a careful smile. "That sounds nice." I smiled back. She thought she was buying herself time, but time was the one thing she didn't have anymore. That afternoon, I met with a divorce lawyer. I had already gathered enough evidence to make sure she wouldn't get a dime from me. The hidden bank account? The stolen funds? The affair? It was more than enough to ensure she left with nothing. But I wasn't stopping there. I wanted to make sure she didn't just lose me. I wanted to make sure she lost everything. And by the time I was done, she would. I left the lawyer's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. It was all coming together. The financial records, the hidden account, the affair. I had enough to ensure Julia wouldn't get a cent in the divorce. But that wasn't enough. I didn't just want to walk away. I wanted her to feel it, to lose the life she had so carefully built behind my back. And for that, I needed one final piece of the puzzle. That night, I made my move. Julia was in the shower when I slipped into our bedroom, her phone sitting face down on the nightstand. It was locked, but I didn't need to guess the passcode. It was the same one she used for everything. Her messages to him were sickeningly intimate. "I can't wait to finally be free. He still doesn't suspect a thing. I hate lying to his face, but we're so close now." I clenched my jaw as I scrolled. She had planned it all. She had intended to take half of everything, walk away with my money, and start a new life with him. She had already picked out an apartment. With him. I took screenshots of everything, forwarding them to my email. I wasn't going to confront her with just words. I wanted her to see proof. I wanted to watch the moment she realized she had lost. By the time she came out of the shower, I was lying in bed, acting like nothing had changed. She climbed in beside me, her wet hair damp against the pillow. "Hey," she murmured, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "You okay?" I turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, looking into those deceitful eyes. I smiled. "I've never been better." She smiled back, completely unaware that by this time tomorrow, her entire world would come crashing down. I spent the next day preparing for the inevitable. By this time tomorrow, Julia would be out of my life for good. I had already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce papers were ready. Every financial move she had made had been documented. I even had a private investigator dig into her lover. Turns out, he had a habit of seducing wealthy women and draining them dry before moving on to the next. She thought she was leaving me for a better life. She had no idea she was walking into a disaster. That evening, I set the trap. Julia came home late again. I was waiting for her in the living room, a bottle of wine open on the coffee table. She hesitated when she saw me, probably wondering why I wasn't in bed yet. "Hey," she said, slipping off her heels. "You're up late." I smiled, pouring her a glass. "Yeah, just thinking." She eyed me warily but took the glass anyway, sitting across from me. "Thinking about what?" I leaned back, watching her carefully. "About us. About the future." She nodded slowly, sipping her wine. "Me too," she said softly. "I think we should talk about—" She never got to finish, because that's when I pulled out the folder. I slid it across the table. Her name was printed on the front. Inside, copies of her secret bank statements, screenshots of her messages, photos of her and her lover, wrapped in each other's arms. For the first time in months, Julia was speechless. She went pale, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. I waited, letting the silence stretch, watching the panic bloom across her face. "You," she swallowed, looking up at me. "You went through my—" "Everything," I said calmly. She opened her mouth, probably to lie, but I cut her off. "I know about the money," I said. "I know about the affair. I know about your little escape plan." Her breath hitched. "But here's the thing, Julia," I continued, my voice turning ice cold. "You're not leaving with half. You're not leaving with anything." She blinked, stunned. I leaned in. "The apartment you planned with him? He's done this before. He's a scam artist. I have proof of that too." Her lips parted, a flicker of fear crossing her face. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She stared at me, her breathing shaky. But we can fix this," she whispered. I laughed, genuinely laughed. She had the audacity to think she could cheat, steal, lie, and still come out unscathed. I stood up, grabbing another folder from the table. This one was much thinner. I tossed it in front of her. Divorce papers. Her hands clenched the fabric of her dress as she stared at them. "I'm giving you one option," I said. "Sign them. Walk away quietly. If you fight me on this, I will make sure you leave with absolutely nothing. No money, no assets, no reputation." She was shaking now. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "Take the deal, Julia," I said softly. "It's more mercy than you deserve." For the first time in our marriage, Julia was completely silent. She sat there, staring at the divorce papers like they might disappear if she looked at them long enough. But they wouldn't. She had spent months planning to leave me, to drain me of everything I had worked for, to walk away with half of my life in her pockets. Now, the tables had turned, and she knew it. She swallowed hard, finally finding her voice. "You don't have to do this." I leaned back in my chair, amused. "I don't." She shook her head quickly, her hands gripping the papers like they might save her. "We can fix this. We were happy once. We can be happy again." I almost laughed. "Happy?" I repeated. "Is that what you were thinking when you were screwing him in hotel rooms? When you were stealing from me?" She flinched, guilt flashing across her face. "I was confused," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "Spare me the excuses." I cut her off. "I'm not here to listen to your pathetic justifications. I'm here to watch you sign those papers." Her lower lip trembled, and for a brief moment, I wondered if she might actually start crying. But she didn't. Instead, her expression shifted, from guilt to anger. Her hands clenched into fists. "You think you've won," she spat. "You think you can just throw me away like garbage?" I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not throwing you away, Julia. You did that all on your own." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't over." I smirked. "Oh, but it is." I pulled out one last piece of paper, a printed email from her lover. A breakup email. Apparently, once he realized she was no longer coming into my money, he decided she wasn't worth the trouble. Her eyes scanned the words, her face draining of color. He was leaving her. She had nothing now. No money. No lover. No future. Just the consequences of her own choices. I grabbed a pen and placed it in front of her. "Sign." She hesitated, her fingers twitching. She could fight this. She could drag this into court, humiliate herself, lose everything in a much more public way. Or she could take what little dignity she had left and walk away. Finally, with shaky hands, she picked up the pen, and she signed. The moment her signature hit the paper, something inside me settled. Relief, satisfaction, closure. Julia, on the other hand, sat frozen, her hands still clutching the pen like she could undo what she had just done. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. Maybe she thought I would change my mind, that I would let emotions take over and beg her to stay. She didn't know me at all. "You can leave now," I said, my voice calm, steady. She blinked. "Just like that?" "Yes," I said, standing up. "Just like that." I grabbed the documents and tucked them into the folder, knowing that the next step was officially filing them. There was no coming back from this, and that's exactly how I wanted it. She didn't move at first. She just sat there, staring at me, like she was trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Like she was the victim in all of this. "You never even asked why," she whispered finally. I scoffed. "Why?" I repeated. "You mean, why did you betray me? Why did you lie to me for months? Why did you try to steal from me?" She swallowed hard, shaking her head. "It wasn't just about the money." I crossed my arms. "No, I suppose it wasn't. It was about greed, about selfishness, about you thinking you could have everything without consequences." Her eyes darkened. "I loved you, you know." I laughed coldly. "You don't betray people you love." She looked away, biting her lip. Maybe she was realizing finally that there was nothing left to say. I walked to the door, opening it wide. "Take whatever you need," I said simply. "But by tomorrow, I want you gone." She hesitated for a split second. Then, without another word, she walked out, and I shut the door behind her. The house was silent. For the first time in years, there was no sound of Julia's footsteps, no distant hum of her voice on the phone, no trace of her presence lingering in the air. She was gone. I stood in the center of the living room, staring at the door she had walked out of just minutes ago. The weight of everything hit me all at once. Not just the betrayal, not just the anger, but the sheer finality of it. This chapter of my life was over, and I had one. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. The divorce papers were filed. The financial accounts were secured. Julia had packed her things overnight, leaving behind only the memories of what once was. I should have felt something. Regret, sadness, maybe even a hint of nostalgia. But all I felt was relief. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "Julia, meet me for coffee. One last time." I stared at the message for a long moment. I didn't know her anything. Not a conversation, not a goodbye, not a single second more of my time. And yet, I was curious. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already there, sitting by the window, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She looked different. Not the confident, put-together woman I had married. Not the deceitful, cunning woman I had exposed. She looked lost. She looked small. I sat down across from her without a word. She glanced up, hesitant, as if unsure how to start. "I wasn't expecting you to come." "I wasn't planning to," I admitted. She exhaled, looking down at her cup. I needed to see you." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "Why?" She swallowed hard. "Because I wanted to apologize." I almost laughed. I waited, letting her sit in the silence, letting her feel it. "I made a mistake," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was selfish. I was stupid. And now I've lost everything." I tilted my head. "You mean, now that your lover is gone? Now that your plan backfired?" Her lips parted slightly, her eyes shining with something close to shame. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. I shook my head with a smirk. "Yes, you did. You just didn't think you'd get caught." She flinched. "Good." She took a slow breath, forcing herself to meet my gaze. "Is there any part of you that could ever forgive me?" I studied her carefully, letting the question settle between us. Then, I gave her my answer. "No." She sucked in a sharp breath, but I didn't stop. "I don't hate you, Julia," I continued, my voice calm, steady, "but I'll never forgive you. And I will never let you back into my life. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table. Take care of yourself. And just like that, I walked away. I stepped out of the cafe without looking back. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. No more lies. No more betrayal. No more pretending to be the fool in a story that was never mine to begin with. The cold air hit my face as I walked to my car, but I barely noticed it. This was it. The ending she never saw coming. The one where I walked away. The days that followed were quiet, peaceful. Julia tried to call once. I didn't answer. She sent a long, rambling email, filled with apologies, with excuses, with desperate attempts to rewrite history. I deleted it without reading past the first line. She wasn't my problem anymore. One evening, I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the city skyline. A fresh start. A new beginning. The life I should have had all along. My phone buzzed beside me. A text. Not from Julia. From someone else. Sophie. Hey, stranger. It's been a while. Feel like catching up? I stared at the message, a slow smile curling at the edges of my lips. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to stop looking back and start looking forward. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.